Hello, friends, and friends who are soon to get on, I'm sure. Welcome. This is a painting that I did, and I thought I was finished with it October of 2017, so about 26 months ago. I mentioned all this a couple days ago when I pulled it out of storage and decided to give it a re-finishing. So let's get official here, according to Dan Nelson's silly rules of officialdom. This is Daily Art Adventure number 814. Some fuzz and some final edit. I've been painting upstairs here in my studio for a couple hours already today. Not on this painting though. Let me show you what else I've been doing, because this might be a good moment just to give a little bit of instruction. I've said this before, but I don't usually stress it. Let me clear these messy paints out of here so I can just set this up here for a second. So this is what I've been working on earlier today. And I have here the photograph from my client. This is a view of Kauai, the western island in Hawaii. Okay, so that's what my client sent to me. Kelsey, it is, on her honeymoon. That's the photograph, and from that I did this sketch. Okay, hang on, let me not confuse you. So I did this black and white gouache sketch based on the photograph, okay? And then I put that in, popped that in, scanned that into my computer, and colorized it in Photoshop. So this is what I sent to my client. She made one slight change, very reasonable, and so I'm doing this painting based on the photograph and my sketch. The acrylics are all done. I glazed the whole thing in oil. I did some black pencil, and then I did dark details in oil. Okay, so that's where I stopped. And here's the teaching moment I want to share with you. I don't usually stress this, but this is a good opportunity. If you have the opportunity to pause at any point in your painting process, now I know a lot of you, that's all you do. That's all you do is pause. Sorry, that's a little bit harsh. But there is one spot, one place in Dan Nelson's technique that is particularly beneficial to pause overnight, and that is after the dark details, because all the dark stuff on here is wet. Does that make sense? It's oil, it's wet. But I used liquid, so it'll be totally dry by tomorrow. And I could do a fuzz layer right on top of this, but you realize that when you do that, you're going to be picking up a lot of this wet stuff. And you just make it work, okay? But it's easier. If you want a tip for making your life easier, let the dark details dry and commence with the fuzz layer or the final edit layer, either one, on top of a dry painting. So that's what I'm going to do on that one, and that is what I am doing here. That's the reason I brought the other painting up, to show you. On both of these paintings, I have that luxury of pausing, waiting a day or more for the previous work to dry. And again, you don't have to do that, of course, but it just makes life easier when you're doing the fuzz layer if everything underneath it is dry. So because my fuzzing here, which as you can tell is very energetic, and it's not causing anything underneath to pick up, to blur, to smear. All right, so that's just want to make that quick point. Now back to this painting. It was a finished painting. Again, I did it about 26 months ago, and I did find a sticker on the back of it, so it has been in one gallery at least once. The other day I couldn't remember if it had been in any gallery at all, but I have discovered that indeed it was in a gallery. I think it was Little Art Gallery in downtown Raleigh, North Carolina, which was my busiest gallery for the last several years of its existence, till it went out of business. That was a year ago. I don't blame them at all. They had a great 50-year run, and it was just the right thing to do. So, but when Little Art Gallery closed in January of 2019. For me, that was just a trigger. It's like, okay, for me, time to pull out of all galleries. I didn't go away mad. I wasn't angry. It was just time for me to pull out. So I'm not in any galleries. At one time, I was in 8 galleries across the state of North Carolina. And that might sound impressive, or that might, if you're an experienced artist, that might sound foolish. And I would say that the foolish judgment is closer. Now, 8 is, in my opinion, 8 is too many. It was just, and they were separated by, of course, some of them by hundreds of miles. So it was just too much to manage to keep relation. Because when you have a gallery, or when you're in a gallery, from the artist's point of view, the perspective, it's your job. If I can talk to my fellow artists as a fellow artist for a moment, it's the artist's job to primarily to maintain relationship with that gallery, and I just didn't have the bandwidth, as we say nowadays. I just didn't have the wherewithal, didn't have the bandwidth to maintain that many relationships. So some of those, the season in which I was in 8 galleries all at the same time did not last very long. Most of the last 15 years I've been in 5, I would say, maybe 6 galleries. All right, let's talk about painting a little bit. I pulled this painting out of my attic, which is behind me here, largely at the instigation and encouragement of my good friend David Foster. He and I have led our Painters Forum together for about the last 12 years or so, something like that. Might be a year more or less. I don't think less, 12 or 13 years. Anyway, good friend, good painter, good friend. And he said, Dan, Oil Painters of America deadline is coming up, which of course I was keenly aware of that. And I have at the moment 2 paintings ready to enter. This Friday is the deadline, 3 days from now. And I have 2 paintings ready to go. One is this one, I think is that one down there, the Charleston street scene and church steeple, okay? The other one is, I'm calling it plain vanilla. It's an ice cream factory, ice cream plant. That's downstairs. But David said, no, you can enter 3 this year. I said, whoa, okay. And he said, I think you should enter this one. He remembers this one from our painters forum a couple years ago. And for some reason, he kind of liked it. Anyway, so that I was curious. I didn't even know if I could find it, but I went into my attic, and sure enough, there it was. And by the way, this is the maximum size that they allow. 1,200 square inches, 30 by 40. And I got it out. So a couple days ago, got it out. And my physical, visual reaction to it was, it's not bad. Being really honest with you here. But, as you might imagine or might expect, 2 years in my career, in my lifetime, my art life, is quite a long time. So I have changed, grown, I like to think, evolved noticeably in the last 2 years. And so what I'm doing now is giving this 2-year-old painting an update, which is kind of fun. Rare moment, rare opportunity. You don't get to do that very often in life, I don't think. By the way, what I just did, and whoa, sorry, I was off, sorry. So I just did a very pale hint of blue, sorry about that. I just, a little phthalo and a little ultramarine, both, so a neutral blue, like a cobalt blue, with, of course, with white, mixing up some more as we speak. And because it dawned on me, as, again, being hopefully a better artist than I was 26 months ago, it dawned on me that having a cool color, cool bit on this house would be a nice counter to all the warm stuff that's happening. I'm going to at least play around with. Now, you understand too that everything I'm doing right now, if I do something I don't like, I can wipe it right off. In fact, I'm going to pick up a rag in a minute and do some lifting. Again, one of the benefits and advantages of painting on top of a dry painting, working on top of a dry painting, right? So 26 months ago, 2 years and 2 months ago, I certainly did do the fuzz layer. It's been about, I think, 3.5 years since I started the fuzz. I think that's right. But as I looked at this painting the other day, I think I discerned that even though I did do quote-unquote fuzz 26 months ago, I am more what's the word? Bold, stronger with it now. I'm more crazy with it. There was a long period of time, really, at least a year, where I wasn't sure whether this crazy thing that I call the fuzz layer, I wasn't sure whether it was a permanent part of my repertoire or just a passing fancy. Well, 2 years later, it has become, it's still a part of my toolbox, my repertoire. And in fact, it's actually quite a bit stronger, quite a stronger element even than it was 2 years ago. So that's kind of interesting. I got to talking the other day when I was working on this. By the way, a couple days ago, you can watch me work on this painting. I basically just did a glaze over the whole thing. Glazes, more than one color, but a glaze, and lifting some, and then wiping off with a rag. It's basically all I did. And I talked about this mystery. Oh, I also did pencil the other day, that's right. And I talked about this thing that I can't quite wrap my mind around, but I have a guess today. And that is that on the whole, my paintings, I think I've become much more aware of soft edges in the last 2 years since I did this painting. Much more conscious of this reality, which I say often. Here it is. Here's my mantra in this regard. Ready? It's easy for a painting to have too many hard edges. That's an easy mistake to make. It's nearly impossible, conversely, nearly impossible for a painting to have too many soft edges. Right? Did I say that right? It's easy for a painting to have too many hard edges. I think that's why I said it. Easy to have too many hard edges, nearly impossible for a painting to have too many soft edges. All right, so what I think has happened in the last 2 years then, however, is that I've made my paintings, they've grown in both directions. I have more intentional soft edges, which is this fuzz layer. Soft edges. But at the same time, one of the chief characteristic differences between the way I paint now and the way I did a couple years ago is that I have more, even hard edges. Technically that's what it is, but it doesn't feel like that to me. It feels like my paintings have more tooth, more scratchiness, and really it is hard edges, but it doesn't feel like hard edges. Somehow the word grit is a word that I've used here in the last several months. My new paintings have more grittiness, and I don't mean in subject matter, I'm talking literally, physically, visually. My new paintings have more grittiness about them than they did 2 years. So that's kind of interesting, but it seems to me I've gone in both directions. I've gotten more fuzzy, more soft, and more gritty at the same time. Now, I don't really know how that can be, because those are opposite things. So how can you do both? I'm not really sure. When I get more insight on that, I'll share it with you, but I think that is what has happened. I've talked quite a bit over the months about one's evolution as an artist, and certainly about my evolution. Maybe it's because I started oil painting so late in life, age 50 basically. Now, don't again. I don't want to sound. I don't want to trick you. I didn't become an artist at age 50. Okay. I was a full-time professional illustrator for decades. I basically started my professional illustration career at the age of 18. Now, I'm not saying I was any good, but I was paid to do illustration, and in the olden days, and some graphic design as well. Anyway, so maybe it's because I started oil painting so late in life. Maybe it's because I've had so little formal training. I majored in art in college. We've talked about that quite a bit. It did not help a great deal. In fact, it hurt a great deal. Mostly it hurt more than helped. Anyway, I'm trying to figure out why is it that it seems to me that I'm now 65 years old, and it seems to me that my particular growth curve, and having been a professional oil painter, now for 15 years. Why am I still changing and evolving and growing so quickly? Usually we associate this rate of change, we would associate this with an early journey painter, at least I think. In fact, one of the opposite of me is Richard Schmid. I don't know if he still has it organized this way or not. I love Richard Schmid. He's one of my living heroes. But I remember looking at his one of his websites. Maybe it's just still there. I don't know. Several years ago, and he had his paintings arranged by decade, which first of all is a gutsy move on its own. Anyway, I'll leave that subject. But what amazed me about Richard Schmid's work is that it was essentially the same in the 1970s as in the 20-teens. So I don't know how to explain that either. It's like, wow. So maybe if you're as good as Richard Schmid, you just don't change. I can't believe that's the answer, honestly. But anyway, I'm rambling way too much here. I guess part of the point is, golly. Golly, Mrs. Cleaver. Anybody remember Eddie Haskell? Anyway, golly, Mrs. Cleaver. I sure, for an old guy, I sure am changing a lot. So, Marlene, if you catch this later, bless your heart. Marlene is one of my faithful viewers. I don't think she minds. She tells us she's 85 years old, and she blessed me with. She said, "Well, if you keep on improving the way you are, then by the time you're 85, you'll be the artist you want to be," which is just a sweet prophecy over me. So thank you, Marlene. And oh, is that my wife? Oh, it is. I need to let my wife know that I'm broadcasting. Okay, gang. Here's what we're going to do. My wife is the only one that gets to interrupt my broadcast. Sorry about that. I'm going to, before I go, let me say, by the way, there's entirely, in my opinion, entirely too much fuzz on this painting at this point. But what? But what? Do you remember, you regulars? But what? The answer is kind of, who the heck cares? At the end of every phase, like after the pencil layer, there's too much pencil. After the dark details, there's too much dark detail. After the fuzz layer, there's too much fuzz. That's part of my approach to painting. It's only after the very last layer that all these disparate influences are supposed to meld into a perfectly balanced painting. Does that make sense? Okay, hang on just a minute. I'm going to pause here in a minute, call my wife, but let me use up. I was afraid to stop right there because I was afraid I might not remember where I was going next. I want to intensify the green. All right, when I come back, I think I'm going to do some anti-fuzzing almost with some rags. All right, quick pause, be right back. Thanks, bye-bye.
Hey, sweetie. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we did. I think we did. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Um, he- yeah, yeah, that's about what we paid last year. Okay. Hello, are we back? Are we back? Are we back? We might be, but we don't have the monitor yet. Hang on, let's really make sure we're all connected. Hello? Testing 1, 2, 3. Uh-oh. Somehow I lost my microphone with that little exchange. Okay. Bear with me just a minute. I'm going to try to get my sound back up and running. All right, ready to be back? Hang on, we got some bleed happening here. Forgive me. Oh, there's so many technical things that can go screw you out here. All right. There, got sound? Oh, Ray, thank you. You're asking him a question. No. First of all, not heavy body. That sound is terrible. Forgive me just a minute. I can't imagine what just happened. Try that. I'm sorry, folks. I'm gonna keep on working and trying to get this sound fixing. I know it. You don't want to hear me now because I'm just cussing. Just a minute. Testing 1, 2, 3. Good grief. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. All right. Oh my goodness. I won't bother you with all the technical. I know this sounds very something defensive, but the number of technological plates that need to be juggled to do this simple thing that I'm doing is ridiculous. The learning curve has been long and steep, folks. All right. So I've just got a couple more or less clean rags here. And I don't normally do this. Now you can either call it fuzzing even more, or you could call it defuzzing, because in fact I'm taking some of the fuzz off the canvas. Either one. I wouldn't argue with either description. Having done a little bit of that, I'm going to go back and do a little bit more fuzz. Okay. There are three characteristics of the fuzz layer. One, it's translucent, and evidently a lot of Americans or English speakers have some kind of confusion in their brain. You won't. I mean, if you think about it, transparent like glass, opaque like a wall, translucent like a fuzzy light bulb, right? Okay. So once you think about it, you go, okay, I get it. So it's translucent, very soft edges, which is certainly what you see me doing, and local color. So it's a great way to shift some part of the painting, shift the color. That's exactly what I did down here. I made this wall of this house bluish. I did that with the fuzz layer. I also pumped up the green up here and pumped up the blue. In fact, I really essentially pumped, if I can use that word, pumped all the colors in this painting during the last several minutes of fuzzing. Getting a little buzz, forgive me. There we go. All right, I think I'm done fuzzing for a while at least. And even though in the description, in the title of this broadcast, I had said fuzz and then final edit, I'm going to modify that slightly, and I'm going to come in here and do more pencil. So this is an example, and again, I don't know if it stands up to careful analysis or scrutiny, but so I just made the whole painting a lot. I put a whole lot of soft edges. Again, I was doing the fuzz layer 2 years ago, but not as extensively as I do nowadays. Okay, so I just made it more extensive. So I did added a lot of softness, but now here with these pencils, I'm reintroducing a kind of hardness, a kind of hard edges. Now admittedly, it's a very particular kind of hard edge. It's the, if I may be so self-centered, it's the Dan Nelson pencil technique. Not that I'm claiming that it's unique to me, but as far as I know, it's unique to me. Okay, I don't know anybody else who uses these pencils the way I do, or uses them at all, frankly, in oil painting. right, now having done that, I'm going to throw myself another curveball because I was fully expecting to go straight into final edit, and after having done that pencil chaos that you just watched me do, all of a sudden now I'm saying, oh, wait a minute, before I do final edit, I need to do some more dark details. Ooh, that's too much of a good thing. That's better. Again, now that right there, I've done that kind of thing for a long time, but just in the recent months, I've declared that kind of thing to be a normal practice of mine. That is, you put the paint down, in most cases, with a brush, or brushes in my case. You put the paint down with a brush, and then standard operating procedure now for me is, and then you mess it up in some way. Okay, so that's a recent growth. Okay, just for fun, a little while ago I was talking about the I think sort of surprising fast evolution. Again, for someone who's been selling paintings full time for the last, making a living, paying my mortgage, buying groceries by selling paintings for the last 15 years, it seems to me I'm changing at a rather rapid rate, unlike, say, Richard Schmid, who never changes. And he may very well protest. I have a hunch that he would. I have a hunch that if I said, Richard, you do paint the same as you did in the 70s, he'd probably, scoff in some way. But anyway, it looks to me like he's all, but anyway. Here's just for fun. Let's see if I can do a brief list. Because in my case, it's not just like a subtle, like my hand is shifted, my drawing has shifted. No, in my case, it's a definite identifiable technique, if you will, that I've added to my painting technique. So let me start. I'm going to go backwards. What is the latest thing, the latest addition to my personal approach to painting? And this would be like in the last 3 months, maybe even 2, which is not very, very long, right? So it's almost since the beginning of 2020, almost. Not quite, but almost. Okay, what's the latest? I'm going to say it's the one I just mentioned to you, which is I've started making it a regular practice, the norm. Did I say it right? The norm. That after I put paint on the canvas, most often with a brush, that I follow up, usually immediately, by moving that paint around in some way. Okay, so that's the latest addition. Okay, the addition right before that, I'm quite confident of, is finishing the last layer, the very last layer of my painting process. I now call sparkle. And it includes the heavier use of a palette knife. Okay? Now, sparkle is working across the entire canvas and putting, basically like it sounds, putting the lightest colors on top of what's already there. So, same color, just brighter. For instance, if I do sparkle in this green foliage up here, it'll be a lighter green, lighter blue, lighter orange, lighter pale off-white. Okay, so that's sparkle. I think that's the second to the newest, and that's only a few months old. And again, using a palette knife is part of that last layer. Palette knife and creating some impasto or impasto. Creating some, adding some thickness to the paint in the very last layer. And it pretty much has to be a last layer if you're doing impasto, pretty much. That's a slight exaggeration, but only slight. The latest edition before that, I'm trying to think now, is probably a second or sometimes even third glaze in oil. The next oldest development in my painting is the broken color layer. That's been going on for a year, so we're back to about a year from now. And I might be forgetting some. If I remember them, I'll come back and insert them in the right spot. It's a broken color, which comes after I have a drawing issue here that I don't like very much. A drawing mistake that I want to try to fix. Okay, so broken color, that was a big one. Before that, and this is again going back about a year, is the concept of reintroducing the pure abstract marks in the various stages of the painting process. Now I'm getting back into the dim reaches of memory, and I'm not sure I'm going to remember which ones came before that. But those have all happened at least within the last 13 months, if not the last 12. And that's quite a few, I think. Most of you would agree. So the good news is I'm still growing. The bad news is, if there's any bad news, why am I still evolving so quickly? Again, for someone, if you will, who's been selling paintings for a living for 15 years, and before that I was selling illustrations for a living. So I don't know the answer to that. I'm going to count myself blessed. I'm just going to assume the best, not the worst. I'm going to assume that it's a good thing that I'm still evolving so quickly. Yes, let's say it's the result of a particularly supple intellect. Shall we? Shall we say that? Yes, we shall. Thank you. Thank you. What whether or not it's true. I'll claim that. There we go. I like that one. I do feel extremely blessed. That's probably enough talking about me, isn't it? Yeah. Let's just talk about you now. Let's talk about you. So I had no idea I was going to do this much. Dark details. I think I'm ready to quit doing that now. I still have a few brushes that Uncle 60 sent me. And oh, by the way, you guys were asking about, somebody was asking about my acrylic mixture, and somebody else, forgive me, I'm not looking at the names right now, answered correctly. I'll flesh that out. Someone was asking about the ratios of acrylic to medium in my little pots, in my little leftover food dishes, Rubbermaid-ish. They're not Rubbermaid, but Rubbermaid-ish containers. And the answer is, it depends on the quality of the acrylic paint you're using. I wish I had one of my bottles of acrylic, and I don't have it up here, so sorry. But basically, if you're using a high quality like Golden or Matisse, or who knows what else, if you're using a high quality acrylic paint, then you will use more medium to get the pigment count down to the point where it's transparent. Does that make sense? Whereas if you use fairly inexpensive acrylics, which is what I do most of the time, then I don't have to use as much medium. I rarely feel like I'm spending a lot of money on paint. I often feel like, conversely, I often feel like I'm spending a lot of money on mediums. And forgive me, you English majors, I'm gonna say that in the art world, even though the plural of medium is media, I'm gonna say that in the art world that rule doesn't strictly hold. I think in the art world it's appropriate to say mediums instead of media. Although we do say mixed media, don't we? So I might be wrong about that, but that's the feeling I have, that it's a funny little niche or niche. If you want to sound really smart, say niche. If you want to sound ordinary, say niche. It's a funny little niche of life where that rule, the plural of medium, I think in the art world is mediums. I work in a number of mediums. All right. English majors notwithstanding, let's finally start doing some final edit stuff, shall we? Now, if what I said to you a while ago is true about all the additional steps, up until 2 or 3 years ago, oh, I forgot to go back to the fuzz layer, didn't I? Okay, add that to the, anyway, okay. Up until 2 or 3 years ago, the final edit layer was in fact the final layer. Now it's the most important layer, but it's not the final one. So let me tell you where I'm going. Next layer is final edit. That means essentially light, opaque, sometimes translucent, but light, opaque highlights. Light stuff. And tending toward hard edges. Okay, this next layer is hard edge. That means I have to be very careful not to get carried away. I dare not turn off my brain and just start enjoying myself painting all these little shards of color, because I actually enjoy that, and I can get carried away with it, and even though I enjoy it, I don't think it's the best way to paint. And that is the way I used to paint. I used to have way too many hard edge like stained glass window pieces of color. So what's coming next is the final edit, hard-ish bits of light. Then possibly glaze on top of that, or else broken color, let's say broken color, and then a glaze after that, and then sparkle. So at least those 3 layers. So one of the fundamental questions about the final edit layer is, where do you start? There used to be 4 options. Now there are only 3, because the fuzz layer took care of the local color issue. I used to say, if in the final edit, if there was some part of the painting that wasn't the color that you wanted, then final edit was where you'd fix it. But like this is an example. I decided to switch this to blue or cool gray, but I do that now in the fuzz layer. So the 3 options for where to start. Number 1, start with the furthest away object, which is in a landscape is always the sky. That's one option. That's traditional oil painting. Number 2, start with the lightest, brightest, whitest thing, which in this case is this building. By the way, one of the strategic decisions, here's the photograph from which I'm working, and you can't even see this house. This one is around the corner. But I set up my easel in this woman's driveway 2 days in a row and did this painting, then finished it, of course, in my studio. One of the painting began to pop when I decided, now let me show you the photograph again. So in the photograph, this house is receiving a lot of sunlight, correct? But in my painting, as you see, I've decided to make this house in shadow, except for the very tip, and this house, which is around part of the same house, around an L shape, make that the brightest thing. When I made that decision, this painting began to come alive. 3 options. I'm sorry, I interrupt myself. Where to start the final edit? Furthest away thing, the lightest, brightest, whitest thing, which is this house, or the focal point. And here, there's kind of a competition. That's usually not a good thing, but in this case, I don't feel bad about it. Is it the house or the tree? House or tree? I don't know. And for some reason, it seems to be working, even though there's a confusion there. If you don't think it's working, sorry. I think, for some reason, it seems to be working. I think what's happening here is, if this was here by itself, it'd be way too much centered. But they're acting like a pair, and creating a little tension right there, and it gets us in the right position. Anyway, that's what I think is happening. Doesn't matter whether I'm right or not. I clearly know where I am going to start the final edit on this painting. And of course, everything I'm doing on this painting is, second go around, because I finished, or thought I finished, this painting 26 months ago. I hope I remember to zoom back out. In fact, I'm sorry, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to move the camera. Forgive me just a minute here. And that way, if the camera's in my way, I'm more likely to remember to move it. All right, this is especially for you poor people who have, if there's anybody out there who's ever taken a class from me live, my heart goes out to you. It was hard, I know. It was a trial. But this is especially for you. This is the part of my painting process that almost always gets shortchanged in a live painting, unless it's a 3-day painting class, which I love. This is the part that gets shortchanged, and I'll tell you why. Because to some degree, when I'm doing this final edit layer, I am doing plain old ordinary oil painting, traditional oil painting, because I'm painting in I'm painting opaque for one thing. Like most of y'all, unless I've influenced you or somebody else, but most, the great majority of people in our lifetimes, paint in a fairly opaque manner. Richard Schmid is funny, and it's funny that I like him so well and like his stuff so well, because in that regard we are complete opposites. He says anyway that he says don't use a medium. Paint with paint straight out of the tube. Okay, and generally speaking, I criticize that approach to painting because it's opaque painting, and transparent colors are so much richer than opaque ones. So even though he's one of my heroes, I disagree with him in that regard quite staunchly. In other words, to be really brash, and who am I? Forgive me, I know. Well, I don't have the nerve, I don't have the right to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway, that as good as Richard Schmid is, he would be better if he painted in transparent colors. All right, there it said, forgive me, and he'll never hear this, so I doubt that I ever have to defend myself. But that is what I think. In other words, now, and who am I to argue with the godlike Richard Schmid? Well, the answer is one of our other godlike artists. I'll put it another way so it won't sound so offensive. If Richard Schmid painted more like Rembrandt, he would be better. Now, do you understand now? How do I have the nerve to criticize somebody as good as Richard Schmid? Well, I don't. But I can look at Richard Schmid and Rembrandt and say, not on their brushmanship or any of that, no, just on the one issue of transparent versus opaque. Rembrandt gets that, on that one issue, Rembrandt gets it right. Transparent underpainting is way more interesting than opaque. Now, having said that, in spite of the fact that Richard Schmid paints straight out of the tube, a lot of his paints are actually quite translucent, if not transparent. Anyway, plus he does transparent he does very transparent burnt sienna drawings under many of his paintings. All right, that's enough talking about him. Let's get on to other things. Where was I going with that? All right, so this is the step in the Dan Nelson painting process that usually gets shortchanged. So part of the reason I'm always glad to go ahead and record this aspect of my painting is because people need to see it. Because what actually happens in my classes, and even though I'm turning cartwheels and pulling up my hair to try to keep my students from doing it still, especially those with moderate to considerable experience in painting, they really blow it at this point. And I think it's because they let their guard down after doing hours of craziness that they didn't understand, right? They didn't understand the crazy abstract thing. They didn't understand the layers of acrylics. They don't understand the layers of oil because it's all so foreign to them. When we finally get down to this stage of the painting process, they go, oh, thank God, I know how to do this part. And they proceed to plaster and cover up and obliterate all those hours of beautiful work. And then they must go home and say, well, I don't get it. Why do we do all that other stuff? It doesn't even show up. Well, of course, the error is that they covered up too much. So one of the solutions, as you can see here, almost every stroke has daylight between it and the stroke next to it. Does that make sense? And I'm trying to decide how I want to do this. Wow, that was severe, wasn't it? I just took for some reason I wanted to do it with my bare hand. One of the nice things about smearing like that, I like this. I like this out here. I don't like this in here. So one of the good things, can be quite important. One of the good things about smearing like that is that it's fairly easy to remedy or undo if you do too much. Because that's what I'm doing right now, just a finger in a rag and coming in and diminishing the part that I didn't like just down here. Also, a little bit too streaky up there. There we go. Did you catch that? Did you catch all that? I just smeared that very quickly. Doing it fast and doing it slow are not the same thing. And looking for a palette knife now. I guess I'll use this one. Now, that smearing mark that I made just a minute ago with my hand, and I wiped my hand off on a rag. I like how it looks up here, but I don't like how it left this looking, right? So very often, at least in my practice, you put paint on, then you smear it, and then you repaint the thick part, right? I think most people would think, oh, that's too much work. I mean, most non-artists would think, if they try to figure out, well, how did I get this smear up here? Because you can tell now that this has not been smeared. And most people would think, well, he didn't do it twice, did he? The answer is, of course, yes, exactly. It's exactly what I did. All right, before I leave this little bit of a house then, I'm doing some sparkle right now, which is slightly lighter, brighter, whiter, slightly lighter, basically the same color as what I just did a few minutes ago, but slightly lighter. Okay, that's that practice. In fact, I could have added that to my list of things that I've evolved. That's less than 2 years old as a practice. All right, we're going to do another little technique to take another price tag off one of Uncle 60's brushes. Ironically, Horatio, I bought 2 fan brushes just a couple weeks ago, like a week before you sent me your wonderful end of year gift. But both of those fan brushes went to other painting kits in my van and downstairs and so on. So I was actually still in need of a fan brush, an upgraded fan brush up here. So that's exactly what you sent me. Thank you very much. I'm just saying, I didn't even see your name till now, Uncle. He says, if I mess up this painting, can you impeach me? You go ahead and try. It'll never pass the Senate. You might get it through the House. It'll never pass my Senate. All right. Just another little technique. Sometimes, as I said, my brain, for some reason, really when I'm painting, really gravitates to this kind of a stained glass window effect. I like painting that way. And here's the strange mystery. I really do like painting that way, but I have learned against my better judgment that it's not actually the best way to paint. So what you saw me do just then with the fan brush was just soften, again, this sort of hard-edged stained glass window feel that I had happening right there. I softened it with a, not this, here, this was a smear, a one whoosh. The fan brush was back and forth. And what I'm doing now with a pencil, I would call part of that latest practice of put down some paint with a brush and then move it, mess it up in some way. Now I'm going to mix up a light green fairly bright, but close to what's already there, and right at the moment I'm not very close to that at all. The green I'm mixing, I'm not showing you my palette. I mean, I'm not saying that I won't. I'm recognizing at the moment you can't see my palette. Yeah, yikes, that is hot. That is just that's too hot. So that I've got alarm bells going in my head, and the alarm bell. One of the alarm bells that is always in my head is Danger, Will Robinson. Dating myself here. There's a new Lost in Space on Netflix. Have you guys, any of you found that? It's actually kind of fun, but I'm not going to lower myself to start talking about TV programs on this broadcast. No, I am not. Anyway, Danger, Will Robinson. Green is a very dangerous color. To be very, very conservative, in my opinion, with your greens. And if you're going to have a bold green, boy, you'd better have a really good reason and really have it in balance. This is one of the biggest mistakes made by early journey painters in their landscape painting, is the presence of electric greens. They're so easy. Most of the greens that you buy in a tube are electric. They're way too strong. And it's just so easy. So I say that as I, in fact, put this electric green on my canvas. I'm going to make that slightly lighter, so adding some titanium white. My titanium, of course, for you, anybody that's new, is almost always alkyd fast dry titanium, okay? Because regular titanium is one of the slowest drying colors there is. And I don't have time for paintings to wait for paintings to dry. One of the happiest discoveries for me in the past year has been, and some of you guys were a part of it, has been discovering that that I can varnish paintings with Gamblin, I mean to be saying Gamblin brand varnish instead of having to wait the proverbial 6 months. So that's been a nice thing. I am not terribly happy with that color. I'm going to keep filling around. I'm going to add some phthalo to that. And some more oxide red, which is very close to burnt sienna. Okay, much duller. There we go. There we go. And what I'm doing, what I did right there, that was beautiful. if I have to tell you myself. All right. Here's why it was beautiful. First of all, one of the chief objectives in the final edit layer is to echo, that's a good word, echo or reinforce the color or colors that are already there. Okay? So what's on my brushes right now is almost exactly the color of what's already here. All right? Does that make sense? Let that sink in for a second. Secondly, and here's where this hard and soft edge thing comes in. And now I'm zoomed. If I could zoom in even more, I would. Let's see if I can. Hang on. So I'm talking about this area right here. If you're feeling like you can't quite tell what is overpainting and what is underpainting, then bingo, I have painted well. And I'm very much playing, very much conscious of this balance between hard edges and soft edges. Again, just in the last couple years, I read it. The first time I really remember hearing it was reading Richard Schmid. Sorry his name's coming up so many times today, but that's all right. Reading his book, Plein Air Painting, which I still have not finished, which means, it must mean I'm not finding it terribly spectacular as a book, be that as it may. He uses the term edge control, and what he means by that is having an awareness of the balance between hard and soft edges. Then there's a name for this principle. There's a name for this experience, but I forget what it is. It's, you know, once you notice a yellow Volkswagen, then you start seeing yellow Volkswagens everywhere. That's just a silly example. With me? Okay, so once I heard the phrase edge control, then I heard all kinds of other people saying it. Anyway, this right here is in my opinion, well, at least I'm very aware of it, and I think I'm doing a good job of edge control. Of course, this is just a tiny little microcosm of my painting, but I'm very conscious of what marks. Say, there's a hard edge right there, but it's soft here, medium soft here, and so forth. Whereas on this side of the tree, I'm not quite as successful because frankly I've got too many hard edges. So let's just go ahead since I'm talking about it. So as you can see, there are a lot of ways to affect edge control, to accomplish edge control, to affect hardness of edge. And this is just one technique is put it down and then move it around, put it down and mess it up. This is most precisely why oils are so much better or easier. Just because they're easier doesn't mean they're better, but I think they are better and easier than acrylics. You cannot do anywhere near this kind of subtlety. You don't have this window of workability, of course. With acrylics, you're very limited. I know, and you can tell me, well, you can use a retardant. I know that. I've used them, tried it. Yep. Not the same. Now, there's some people who do Quan Ho. Is that his name? No, Chong Quan. I forget. Forgive me. It sounds like I'm being funny, but I'm not. I'm actually trying to remember his name. He's been here. He's taught at Nicole several times. Who does? Oh no, there's a John Poon. Maybe I'm thinking John Poon. I think that's who it is. Now I'm sounding like a horrible racist because I confused one Chinese person with another. Purely unintentional, I promise. My racism is all unintentional. Somebody out there might not be thinking that's very funny. But I do think it's funny. All right, so I'm going to back up now. Let you get a little bit wider angles. Anybody saying anything? Oh, you guys are... Oh, something so pixelated. Oh, my painting. Oh, good. Oh, the autofocus. Yeah. Danger, Dan Robinson. Exactly. All right, let me tell you a little bit of the story about the day when I went and did this painting. I think it was October of 2017. So this is like one in a series of paintings that I was doing. I didn't have any commissions on the board at the time, so I was free to do whatever I wanted to do. And I was in the mood to do some tree studies. I just wanted to, just like the word sounds, I just wanted to improve my tree ability, my tree painting skill by going out and painting trees. And this was I think the third of, I did one tree painting, I think 3 weeks in a row. And what that meant in this case was I just jumped in my white panel van, looks like a workerman van. I think I had this van at that time. And we live, my wife and I, with our kids, all our kids that you see periodically. We live right on the edge of civilization here in Raleigh, North Carolina. The bad part about that is it takes quite a while to get anywhere, and that's, in town. Every time we go to town, it's basically 15 minutes just to get to civilization, or to get downtown. So it's 25 minutes to get downtown. Anyway, 15 minutes to get to Lowe's, Home Depot, the mall, restaurants, so on. Anyway, that's the bad side. The good side of that, and I think a lot of you can relate to this, the good side, on the other hand, is if we jump in our cars and drive the opposite direction from town in a mere 2 miles or 4 minutes, driving the speed limit, 3.5 minutes, we can be in country. Almost the same as it was 30 years ago when we first moved to this part of the country. Almost the same as it was. So that's really fun. So this is what I did. That's exactly what I did 2+ years ago. I jumped in my van, and instead of driving toward town, I drove the opposite direction. And I was looking for picturesque big old trees. And as you can see, it was autumn. It was fall-ish time of year. And day one, there's just stories to all of this, but I'll spare you. Well, first of all, on each day, I ran the risk of being shot because, frankly, I was trespassing. It was a calculated risk. I thought that the likelihood of my getting shot is actually fairly small. And indeed, I did not get shot. And indeed, I made friends at all these places. Anyway, there's some fun stories in there, but I'm going to skip ahead. And indeed, this was my third day, not in a row, but like third week of going out. Let's just find a tree and paint it. So as you can imagine, I drove by. The road here is just 20 feet behind me. And I, of course, saw this tree and some other trees as well. But this one in particular got my attention, as you could probably well imagine. And I pulled into the driveway. I didn't see anybody. There was no car in the driveway. And I couldn't tell if the house was empty, abandoned, vacant. It was kind of hard to tell. So I carefully stepped out of the car, hoping I wouldn't get shot and hoping I wouldn't be attacked by a guard dog. The latter of those two is actually more of a concern than the former. And I called out fairly loudly. I said, "Hello, hello, anybody home?" You know, that kind of stuff, the thing you do. And I didn't hear or see anything. So I went back to my van, and I said, I'll write a note. So I wrote a note. "Hello, my name is Dan Nelson. I'm an artist." I was looking and attached my business card to it, attached a piece of tape, and I was going to tape this note on their front door. But after standing at the front door, which is on this side of this building, under a porch, lean-to porch, I said, "Nah, I don't think they use their front door. I think this is a back door kind of establishment." So I walked around the house, and there's another porch between these two structures. It's as if two houses sort of had been attached by a running porch or something. Anyway, so it's another porch. I said, yeah, this is the door that they use. Sure enough. So again, now I'm trespassing even more, right? Because it's not just someone standing, near the road. Now I'm gone into their compound, if you will. And so I'm walking toward the porch in a very cautious manner. I put my foot up on the first step, and there is a very threatening growl. Oh my goodness. My heart jumped. I jumped straight backwards, and knowing enough not to run away from a dog necessarily, I backed up. That right there on the porch was a big Rottweiler. Not my favorite kind of dog to begin with. And it wasn't a golden retriever or a beagle. No, it was a Rottweiler. And so I'm backing, and once I get far enough, then I speed up a little bit and walk away, and I can't remember what I did next. I think I might have gotten in my van. I just want to see, okay, what's happening here. My easel, I already set up my easel up outside my van. And I think I sat there for a couple of minutes. And, I know, and then I go, "Here, boy, here, girl." I'm making doggy sounds, calling, "Come here, Fido." And the dog doesn't come. So I know the dog's there. I know this scary looking Rottweiler is sitting on the porch right around the corner. But he doesn't come, and he doesn't come, and he doesn't come. I call him, and I call him, and I can't remember if I peeked. I think I might have peeked around the corner, you know. No, no sign of him. So, okay, well, I guess he's a shy Rottweiler. That's the only kind I like. So I start painting. And I can't remember what the occasion was, but for some reason, either I forgot something at home or my wife needed something from me. Anyway, this is about only about 3 miles from our house. There was some reason that my wife Nancy had to come and visit me to pick up something or drop off something. I can't remember. You know, she's very good at times when I'm. No, she's very good all the time. She's very good at about, you know, rescuing me when if I've forgotten my liquid or who knows what, you know. So anyway, there was some reason she came and visited me, and guess what? She brought all the kids with her in the family mobile, our daughter's van and son-in-law's van with all the car seats in it. So she pulls up a few minutes later, and the kids are all happy to see me. My name's Bigka, and they all jump out of their van, and they're walking around and chattering and laughing and looking at things and so on and so forth. Can you see where this is going? Well, evidently, that was the dog's ticket. Evidently, this dog loves children. He doesn't care much for grown-up males, for men. But boy, does this dog, male dog, I was soon to learn, boy, does this dog love children. So she came tearing around the corner. And of course, I mean, next thing you know, I'm seeing a Rottweiler dashing at full speed toward my grandchildren. And they see the Rottweiler too. And they're pretty good with dogs. We don't have a dog right now, but, you know, they're pretty good with dogs. But strange Rottweiler running toward them, tongue hanging out. And a Rottweiler is an amazingly athletic animal. I mean, they're amazing animals. They really are. But they're just solid muscle. They're built like a brick. Anyway, this Rottweiler comes tearing around the corner. So you can imagine, I've got 2 girls and 2 boys, and they're tearing around. Next thing you know, they're tearing around, terrorized. Ah! And I said, get the van, get the van, get the van. So they jump in the van, you know, eyes dilated, saliva flying, screams, you know, the one defense that little children have against most threats is an ear-piercing scream. So they're jumping in the van. Well, evidently this dog, the only thing he likes better than children is children in vans. So he jumps in the van after them, and of course then they're screaming bloody murder. At least some of them. I don't know how many of them, but it was a chorus. And honestly, at that point, I knew we were not in trouble. Because you could tell from, first of all, most attacking dogs, I don't think, unless they're really serious, most attacking dogs are not going to jump into a van. And sure enough, this dog was just all over children. He just loved kids. So his tail, his whole body is wagging. He's so excited. And at that point, I could tell, like I said, that we were not in trouble. This was a friendly dog who loved kids. This story's not over. This is all just the preamble. Trust me. No, it's more than that. But anyway, so at that point, then I manhandled the 40-pound dog, picked him up, and carried him forcefully out of the. I was the hero then. I was the grandpa hero. Saving the kids from certain death. in their minds, and picked up the dog and put him outside, and the kids closed the doors. And little by little, they discovered he was a friendly dog, and they came out and played, although he was way too rough. Again, he's built like a brick. Our kids, their age, they weigh 30 pounds, less than the dog does, 40 pounds maybe. Anyway, hang on just a second. I need to do a little fan brushing down here. So they played around a little while, but not too much. This dog was too rough for them. So they take off. Their job is done. Nobody's hurt. Yay. They had some excitement to go home and tell their dad about. And then I commenced to continuing to paint. Look at my easel working on this canvas. Well, now the dog is warmed up, and now the dog knows he doesn't have to be afraid of me either. I'm trying to decide how to say this delicately. Well, evidently, once this dog discovered that I was a friendly male adult human, well, he began to feel real friendly toward me. And next thing you know, I'm trying to paint, and I've got this 40-pound, built like a brick Rottweiler. I can't forget. Waxing romantic with my hind leg. I'm trying to paint, and I've got a dog humping my leg. I go, no, I'm kicking him, I'm pushing him off. He backs up for 10, 15 seconds and comes right back at me. So I go from being afraid of this dog to, being this dog's favorite boyfriend, evidently. And oh my, and I was broadcasting, by the way. You could still go back and watch me, because I'm laughing. I'm telling everybody what's going on. I mean, I didn't have any choice. No, go, scoot. Oh, this dog loved me. Anyway, I can't remember how I finally got away from the amorous dog, but I did. And about, an hour later, it's almost getting dark, and a car comes roaring in the driveway. Young African-American young man comes out of the car, and of course I'm finally, it's like, glad to see somebody so I can explain that I'm not, that I'm good people, and so on and so on. Well, he was friendly enough, and he says, yeah, I'm coming to, whatever, take my mom to work. I said, what? What are you talking about? Yeah, anyway, it turns out his mother had been home the whole entire time. Now, I'd been painting outside in her front yard for 3 hours by this time. And he was coming, I think, to take her to work or something like that. Anyway, so sure enough, she comes out of the house. Her name is Sarah. And I still owe Sarah a print of this painting. The reason it hasn't been made yet is I've never been finished enough with this happy enough with this painting to make prints of it. But I will after this, and I'm going to take a free print over to Miss Sarah and thank her for the use of her dog. Thank her for the use of her front yard. Oh my goodness! So that's if I was to write a book about playing my adventures, plein air painting, that would definitely be one short chapter in the book. I've been attacked by dogs, not infrequently in the course of my life, mostly while running. But That's the first time I've ever been attacked in that manner. Monique, you remembered the part with the dog? That is hilarious. Somebody told me the other day that when I was working on this painting that this was one of the first paintings they saw me do. They still like it. All right, some light blue. You're saying, if that is a chimney, then the bottom part should be in a darker shade. That is possible. Yeah, I think you're right, light blue. You need to see the painting. Yeah, The Adventures of Dan Nelson. Isn't that crazy? Well, this is definitely a chimney. I'm not sure if that's what you're asking. I will make that a little bit clearer. It's actually notched. The fascia, the overhang of the roof actually notches into that. It is a little bit crooked, and I'll straighten it a little bit, but I want it to be a little bit crooked because that's actually the feel, the accurate feel of this house. It was very old country style. Been around and seen better days, you know what I mean? Oh, so the rest, even there's more to that story, not about the dog. Me and the dog got along fine after that. After I persuaded him that I was not romantically inclined, we were just good buddies, just friends. I said, "No, we're just friends." And so once you know, I got in my van, packed up the first night, packed up to go home, and proceeded to run over her mailbox, crunched it completely, smashed it down. Oh my goodness. So I think that, in fact, I think that was I don't know if it was the first or the second day anyway. So when I finished painting the second day, that's what it was. I made a trip to the nearest Home Depot, bought a new bought a new mailbox post, and proceeded to repair her mailbox. And she told me, "Yeah, that's the 5th time it's been run over." And there's a real reason for that. It was placed in a very peculiar, unusual spot in relation to her driveway. It was like in the middle of her driveway. You could drive on one side or the other of the mailbox, but don't drive down the middle of her driveway or you will run over the mailbox, which is precisely what I did. Anyway, that's enough story, isn't it? That was crazy. So I can't believe here I am, over 2 years later, revisiting the painting and revisiting the hair-raising adventure. I'm not happy with that. With the, whatever you call this thing, the shade thing over the window. I wanted it green, but it just got too busy. Oh, that looks pretty good. It's a little bit like one time, I think I've shared this story before. This happened before I started broadcasting. I had a painting in my studio, what I call a problem child. You know, it's a pretty good painting, but I don't know, something not quite right about it, and it's leaning up against the wall in my studio downstairs, and every, say, 6 months or so, I would get it out and mess with it a little bit, try to fix it, but nah, it's still not quite right. So finally, after maybe 3 years, I said, all right, yeah, that's enough. I've given this painting enough chances to give myself enough chances to get this painting right. I give up. I'm just going to put it in my discard pile out in the garage. And in those days, I had a system. I'm not saying I won't do it again, but at the time I was stripping oil paint off. By the way, let me zoom in here again. So this is a good example of what I like to see happen in the final edit stage. So I've got some color on my brushes. It's slightly lighter than what's say. That's always the case. You know, it's got to be. If you want it darker, then you do transparent, right? But if you want it lighter, then most of the time you want it just slightly lighter, and it can shift a little bit. Like what was on my brushes a minute ago was slightly browner. But the subtlety of, you can't quite tell what is underpainting or what is overpainting. In my opinion, that's good painting. Another general principle that is being reflected in this at the moment is our eyes are capable of extraordinary discernment. I don't know if you know this or not. If you have decent eyesight, our eyes can see remarkably well. And they can really see the difference between one shade and another. Okay, and the general principle is, given the choice, our eyes prefer, I'm going to say, subtlety. So this is kind of in contrast to the carnival side of our personality, which is a legitimate side of our nature. There's a time for rock and roll. There's a time for the subtlety of a 2x4 upside the head. That's okay. But generally speaking, the more sophisticated your eye becomes, and I think I mean that in a very literal sense, then the more your eye enjoys subtlety, not bluntness. So I think that's what I'm doing here now. A person of low visual they can be extremely intelligent. Might be a world-class mathematician or maybe even a musician, but not everybody has the same visual acuity, and there are some people who wouldn't see. Like right now, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 distinct colors of blue-gray in that wall, at least, without counting the dark lines in between. And generally speaking, again, generally, human eyes enjoy subtlety. That's probably another shift that's taken place in my painting over the last several years, is discovering, given the choice, our eyes generally would prefer more subtlety, not less. There was something I started to tell you a little while ago, and I forgot what it was. So, well, if it was good, it'll come back to me, hopefully. Anyway, it's really time for me to wrap up. My wife and I have a dinner date with some friends tonight. I just looked at my watch a minute ago and said, yikes, time for us to go. So thank you for hanging in there with me. I'm sorry I'm missing all your wonderful chats. I promise I will read them later. Yeah, this painting's getting better. So hopefully you won't have to impeach me. As Uncle says. That would be a shame, wouldn't it? Have after all this good painting took me. Let me see how this looks. Nah, it's just bad. And you just get reflection from my ceiling light. I will tell you that with as much opaque as I've done here, here, and here, that a subsequent glaze layer is almost guaranteed. I'm applying a lot more opaque than I thought I might. So that almost, for me, that almost always means another glaze layer, which is standard for me. That was one of the things I listed a while ago. The idea of doing a second or third oil glaze is fairly new practice and fairly standard for me. All right, gotta go. Thanks y'all for watching. Love you. Bye.